Add RACER.com's Robin Miller to the growing list of major IndyCar figures who have come out in favor of a return to the 25-8 rule, which would guarantee every full season IndyCar team a spot on the 33-car starting grid, regardless of how fast their qualifying time was. Miller came out in full support of this on 1070 The Fans' The Ride with JMV, one of the shows that's one of my personal favorites to listen to when I'm in Indianapolis, and the full context and link to the interview will be provided down in the description below if you'd like to listen to that. For the purposes of this video, I will be responding to the 2-minute clip that Miller had a response to JMV asking him about guaranteed starters for the Indianapolis 500. Many of my points will be backed up by facts and figures. And I would also like to take this opportunity really quick to point out that I respect every single one of these people I have been criticizing recently about this rule. Robin Miller, Roger Penske, Chip Ganassi, Michael Andretti. They're all legends of the sport. Their contributions to it have been immeasurable, will probably far surpass anything I will be able to contribute to it in 10 lifetimes. That being said, legends are not without criticism. And believe it or not, legends can be wrong. Disagreement does not equal disrespect. I can criticize their opinions and their actions without belittling their accomplishments in the sport of auto racing. And honestly, I hope all of you watching will do the same. So with that said, let's get into what Robin Miller had to say.
Guaranteed spots for the 500. I pretty much know where you stand.
No, you don't, brother, because last year I did a little, after Hinchcliffe missed the show, I did a little story with Bobby Rahal, and I said, hey, is it about time we started guaranteed that there's a spot in the Indy 500? And he said, absolutely.
So for those keeping score at home, add Bobby Rahal to the list of IndyCar owners that want the 25-8 rule back. And I will give Robin Miller a little bit of credit here. He's been at least somewhat consistent in his support of this, at least in recent years. Last year, he suggested that with only 35 entries, that perhaps all the cars should start the race and not have a qualifying process at all. And to me, if you're going to start guaranteeing entries to some drivers and some teams and some cars, you should guarantee them to everybody and just stop this farce altogether.
And I couldn't agree with him more.
Wow, that's shocking. Shocking.
Well, now think about this. Now, wait a minute. There ain't no traditions left in Indy. Qualifying's gone from 4 days to 1. Okay, practice has gone from 3 weeks to 4 days. Let's calm down here.
No. Let's not calm down here. Look, I understand that IndyCar and the Indy 500 were irrevocably damaged by the split, and many of the traditions were lost in that dark time period. But I do not agree. In fact, I'm so staunchly opposed to this idea that because a few traditions have gone away over the years, that suddenly invalidates the other traditions that continue, that manage to weather the storm of IndyCar's darkest years. And traditions have been going away well before the split. I mean, consider the name of the track itself, the Brickyard. The track used to be paved with paving bricks rather than asphalt. They finally got rid of the largest stretch of bricks in 1961, leaving only the yard of bricks at the start-finish line. In 1961, I'm sure there were some traditionalists who were upset by that, but none of them were screaming about throwing out all of the other traditions just because one of them ended. The traditions in this race, and the ones that have remained, are what make the race special and what rise it above the other races in the series, and quite frankly, the only reason that the Indianapolis 500 continues to be as valuable as it is to IndyCar racing and keeping it afloat is because of those long-standing traditions.
We don't have 65 cars going for 33 spots.
No, and they didn't have 65 cars trying to qualify in 1995 either. And I think you could go back as far as the 70s before you found any year that had 65 legitimate qualification attempts.
So guess what? These guys that make the commitment to run the whole season, it's hard enough to get a sponsor to run the whole season.
Yes, and how hard do you think it is to sell a sponsorship for an Indy 500 only team? You see, it's not just the big full-season teams that have sponsors. The one-offs do as well. You're completely invalidating them and their sponsorship issues just to put the full-season teams up on some sort of a pedestal. And quite frankly, the problem that the full-season teams have been facing, and I'm surprised they are not pointing this out, is not the Indianapolis 500 itself. That event is profitable. That event makes everybody money. It's the other 15 that don't. So why are the full-season teams complaining and wanting to change the one event on the calendar that works rather than the other 15 that lose them money? That, my friends, is a gigantic leap in logic.
The fact that we have 24 full-time cars is unbelievable. I would have never guessed it because they can't make any money.
And how unbelievable is it that there are 36 to 38 entries for this year's Indianapolis 500 with absolutely no guarantees that all the cars are going to make it into the race?
So those people should be, was the race better off because James Hinchcliffe wasn't in it last year? Hell no.
You sure about that, Robin? Let's take a look at some data. This comes from Google Trends. I put in some driver names who were significant to this year's Indianapolis 500. We have Ed Carpenter, the pole sitter, James Hinchcliffe and Pippa Mann, the two drivers who were bumped, Connor Daly, the 33rd starter, and Will Power, the eventual winner and one of the favorites throughout the month, as well as the most recent IndyCar winner on this chart. Let's see what was searched on Google and what Google thinks are the most powerful search terms among these drivers. As you will see, James Hinchcliffe, for the week of Indy 500 qualifications, one of the most important weeks for promotion of the race itself, was absolutely far and away the top search resulted driver. He was the one who was trending the highest on Google. Second place is Ed Carpenter, nearly double or nearly half of what James Hinchcliffe's impact on the internet was. Barely behind him, only 2 points, is Pippa Mann in a one-off car. This is not a full-time driver. Getting bumped from the field nearly had the same impact on the internet as the pole sitter of the Indianapolis 500. Even Connor Daly, who bumped his way into the field starting 33rd while he was significantly behind the two drivers who were bumped in terms of trending, he was still ahead in terms of internet exposure of the eventual winner and outside front row starter of the race.
Would it be better off if Joseph Newgarden had some kind of a motor issue and didn't make the show? No.
You sure about that, Robin? Let's throw Joseph Newgarden into my chart. Barely ahead of the 33rd qualifier, Connor Daly. I wonder if Joseph Newgarden's sponsors would have preferred to have the exposure that James Hinchcliffe's sponsors got by getting bumped.
And NASCAR, for all their gimmicks and all their tomfoolery, they would never let any of their stars not be in the Daytona 500. It's ludicrous.
Do you want to know the real secret to NASCAR's decline, Robin? It's the fact that they put all of their eggs in race car drivers. They put all of their eggs, all of their promotional material behind Jeff Gordon and Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Tony Stewart. And it was very successful for them for a little while until those drivers retired. Those drivers that had become bigger than the events themselves suddenly were no longer racing. And guess what happened? People stopped watching and people stopped attending the events that were deemed by NASCAR to be less important than the drivers participating in them.
This is not 1965. It's not 1995. There aren't 58 guys going for 33 spots. We're going to have 4 or 5 people get bumped. Well, none of them should be the guys that run every week.
Here's a chart that I put together of all the full-time teams between 2018 and 1992 that missed the Indianapolis 500. You can pause the video or go to my Twitter and just take a look at how many sponsors actually left the sport entirely after getting bumped from the field.
And everybody's like, "Oh, Miller, you're such a hypocrite. You were on Tony George's back when he made it 25-8. What's the difference?" I'll tell you what the difference is. 25-8 was a political weapon. It had nothing to do with competition.
Robin, it absolutely is the 25-8 rule. There is no difference between this rule and that rule in 1996. And of course it's still political. Politics is just power. And while there aren't two warring factions this time, the car owners that are on top see these major teams like McLaren from Formula One, Scuderia Corsa and Dragon Speed from Le Mans and IMSA. These are not shoestring teams anymore coming in to race in the Indianapolis 500. They're bringing big sponsors. They're bringing lots of money. They're bringing talented drivers. And the more teams like that show up are a threat, a direct threat to their business. The more new teams, the more big fish that come into their pond means the less money that they will have to control the sport. A primary sponsor for a one-off team could be a major associate on a Penske or a Ganassi or an Andretti car. They are well aware of this and would prefer that more of the sponsorship money that is generated for the Indianapolis 500 entry list goes on their cars rather than somebody else's.
It was, I'm going to show these guys, they're all going to show up at Indy, or they're going to lose their sponsorship. Well, that didn't happen.
I would just like to point out that he literally just said that teams that chose, didn't get bumped from the Indianapolis 500 and didn't run it, still didn't lose their sponsorship.
So 25-8 got nothing to do with this. And
to reiterate, it's the exact same rule. The circumstances may be slightly different, but it is the exact same rule that was proposed in 1996.
all the people that say it is don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Are you sure about that, Robin?